I hope you enjoyed looking at the messages on the Manna. This will probably be the last one, though it's a wonderful chapter, and I encourage you to go back and look over this chapter. There are lots of things that I haven't mentioned in the videos, but I really enjoyed just thinking and meditating upon this chapter for a few weeks. But we're coming to the second last verse here, and probably the last message, and this message is on the duration of the manna. We already referred to the fact that an omer was 6 pints, and remember there were 2 to 3 million of the children of the Israelites traveling. They were between Elim and Sinai. But here in verse 35, right at the end, even before we have reached Joshua chapter 5, we actually get a side note. And the children of Israel ate manna 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. The manna lasted until they reached the land of Canaan, which was God's promise. This reminds us of the inexhaustible supply God had for his people. For 40 years, for 2 to 3 million people to be preserved. For 40 years, every day in the manna is an amazing supply that God provided for his people. But of course, it becomes even more amazing when we think about what that manna typifies. That manna reminds us of Christ. Let's go, first of all, then, to the Queen of Sheba and Solomon. It's 1 Kings chapter 10. Of course, the Queen of Sheba is visiting Solomon. We read here, the Queen of Sheba heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name. She came to test me with hard questions. And then, as we continue on over to the next page, when she had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house, his meat, the food, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters, and the apparel and his cupbearers, it was a true report, verse 6, she said, which I heard in the whole land about your words and wisdom. However, I did not believe the words till I came and saw with mine own eyes. And indeed, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame of which I hear. Here we see that the Queen of Sheba is overwhelmed at the wisdom and the magnificence of Solomon's kingdom. And she says the half was not told me. She was amazed at the provision that Solomon had made. Sadly, it didn't last, because when we come to chapter 11, we know that his heart was turned away. Verse 4. But at this point, we see the amazing supply that Solomon had. But of course, Solomon, as we know from the New Testament, Matthew chapter 12, greater than Solomon is here. And we're going to go to 2 verses just to finish off. It's the last verse of John's Gospel. And then we're going to Ephesians chapter 3 to listen to the Apostle Paul. John, of course, wrote about the signs, of which there are 8 signs in his Gospel. But the very last verse says this: and there are also many other things which Jesus did, which, if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Amen. An inexhaustible supply for the Israelites. An inexhaustible supply of the wisdom and glory and majesty of Solomon's kingdom. What's even greater is an inexhaustible supply of the wonderful things of Jesus Christ. The world itself could not attain the books that would be written. And then our last verse is Ephesians chapter 3. Just wrap it up. We talked about inexhaustible supply, which John writes that not even all the books of the world could contain all the things that could be written about what Jesus Christ did, even in the time he was here. But then later on, when we come into Ephesians chapter 3, Paul's in prison. and it's verse 8, "To me, who am less than least of all the saints, this grace was given that I should preach among the Gentiles," and there's the expression at the end of verse 8, the unsearchable riches of Christ. That's it. That's the wonderful thing about Jesus Christ and the gospel, the unsearchable riches of Christ. The duration of the manna, it lasted for 40 years for 2 to 3 million people. And God's provision for his people today is the unsearchable riches of Christ, of which John says the world could not contain the books that would be written, and of which Solomon in type, the Queen of Sheba, was overwhelmed at the riches and the supply and the wisdom of Solomon's kingdom. So I hope you've enjoyed this series on the manna, and I hope I encourage you to read Exodus 16, all of the chapter, and pick out the amazing lessons there are in that chapter. Thank you for listening.